Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 492, July the 15th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, let's see what we have this Sunday morning. Okay, the Gateway Pundit is still reporting. As of Saturday evening, Gateway Pundit is reporting that they have three sources within the conservative caucus in the House of Representatives. They're telling them that House conservatives are preparing to impeach Rodenstein. Now, I have no doubt that there are House conservatives, probably Meadows and Jordan and some of the Freedom Caucus members who are, and we already know, they already have the papers drawn up to impeach Rodenstein. They had them 2 weeks ago, but they have never acted. And probably the biggest reason why is because Paul Ryan is not on board. If Paul Ryan is not on board, this vote requires the entire House, and they would need just about every Republican to vote for it. And my guess is that Paul Ryan has not been willing to bring it to a vote. But the Gateway Pundit is suggesting that maybe Paul Ryan has changed his mind. Maybe he is going to allow the vote or hold the vote, and maybe he will actually do some work sending his whip out there to get the votes. But Gateway Pundit is reporting that House conservatives are preparing to impeach Rodenstein this coming week or Monday or something. Again, without Paul Ryan, it's not going to happen. And I don't see Paul Ryan doing it. Maybe, I'll be surprised. Maybe this week Paul Ryan will give it the thumbs up and he'll get his whip out there and they'll get the votes and they'll vote to impeach Rodenstein. And the funny thing is that Mark Meadows came out and made a statement at the very same time that Rodenstein was giving his press conference about indicting these Russian intel guys. At the very same time, Mark Meadows was giving his a briefing, and he was talking about what they learned from Lisa Page, that she had not been advised for a period of 7 months, that she was cleared to talk to any of the committees that were investigating. So they're saying that's, I guess, the final straw for these Republicans. And based on that, I guess that is what they're using to try to generate the support to get this impeachment vote. So we'll see what happens. It's possible, but we've heard this before, haven't we? Quite a few times. Again, I mean, I have no doubt that the Freedom Caucus would have voted to impeach Rodenstein months ago. But without Paul Ryan's, thumbs up, it's not going to happen. So we'll just have to wait and see in the week to come. But if I were a betting man, I wouldn't bet a nickel on it. But at least they're trying. Now, the next 3 or 4 items have to do with the continued confusion and meltdown and chaos going on inside the Democratic Party, which a lot of this is kind of going on behind the scenes, and there's so many other things going on, and not a lot of people are talking about it, but it's pretty well known within the Democratic Party, and you're starting to see people dissenting. Chris Coons, we had Chris Coons, I believe a senator, definitely a Democrat. I think he's in the Senate. He's starting to back away. We've had a couple other Democrats we've heard of that are not wanting to follow the hard line laid out by Schumer and Pelosi, which is that not a one single Democrat better vote to confirm Kavanaugh. So Joe Manchin was asked about Chuck Schumer's statement and his hardline position that no Democrats better cross the line and vote for Kavanaugh. And apparently Joe Manchin's response was that Chuck Schumer can kiss my ass. So Joe Manchin's got a tough deal. He's actually pretty good ahead in that race right now in Virginia. The last time I looked at it, he was well over 10 points up in that race. So the pressure's not really on him right now. But as you get closer to November, it will certainly increase. But I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see Joe Manchin in the last couple of weeks probably buckle under. I think they're expecting, their goal is to have the vote for Kavanaugh in October. So about a month before the election. So we'll have to see where Joe Manchin is there, and I think it'll have a lot to do with where the polls are. But right now, he's not come out and said that he's planning on supporting Kavanaugh or voting for Kavanaugh, but at the same time, he's saying I don't really care about Schumer and his hard line about crossing the line and voting for Kavanaugh. Schumer can kiss my ass. I'll vote to confirm him if I think he should be confirmed. So, Manchin's trying to position himself is kind of independent of the far left wing of the party or the establishment wing of the party. Pelosi, Schumer, the hardline thing against Kavanaugh. He's distancing himself from that, but he's not necessarily showing any indication that he's planning on crossing the line of voting for Kavanaugh. He's just basically playing it safe. It's still too far out from the election for him to come out and make a bold statement. It's probably going to have to happen. I would say he'll run it all the way up to the last minute. He'll take a look at the vote, and my guess is if they don't need his vote, he probably won't vote to confirm Kavanaugh. That would be politically wise in his case, unless he's taken heat from the right side of the equation a month out from the election. If the polls have tightened, if he's in a dead heat or maybe even a point or two behind or even a point or two ahead, that may drastically affect his decision to go ahead and vote for Kavanaugh. My feeling at this point is that Kavanaugh is going to be confirmed, and I think he'll probably get there with, 52, 53 votes. I think there's a couple Republicans, Murkowski and what's her name, the crazy woman up there in Maine, Republicans in name only. But I think the pressure is going to be on them too much to vote against him unless he comes out and says something, really hardcore that's anti-abortion or something like that. Other than that, I think that those two women, Republican women, liberal Republican women, will probably vote to confirm. McCain likely, I don't know if he'll even be alive in October. If McCain should pass away, the most likely what will happen is that his wife, Cindy McCain, will take over for him until they fill the seat, have a new election for his seat. Not really sure what she would do in that position, really. She's a lot like her husband. I think she would probably try to, in his place, she would probably try to do what he would tell her to do on his deathbed. He'd say, honey, I want you to go in there and vote against Kavanaugh, or, make your best decision, or maybe you can vote for him, or if it comes down to one vote, go ahead and vote for him. So it's really hard to say how McCain's going to advise his wife to vote if, in fact, he dies. Now, if he's not dead, then she can't take over for him. What he really needs to do is resign. But that's not going to happen from what I'm hearing. From what I'm hearing, McCain plans on dying a U.S. Senator. He is not planning on stepping down. He's planning on dying as a U.S. Senator. That seems to be his hard and fast position. So I don't know if we're going to get the McCain vote. So we may need a single vote, assuming all the other Republicans vote for him. Corker has given no indication, or Flake, that they would vote against Kavanaugh, but with Flake, you have to wait and see. He may pull a stunt like that. But I think if they get all the Republicans, minus McCain, who probably will not be well enough to vote, or may not even be alive, they may need to pick off one Democrat. I think they'll be able to get at least one. I think there's 3, maybe 4, that they can get who are locked up in some really close races in the Senate. Again, when this vote happens, and I think the reason why McConnell wants to do it in October is because he knows when that'll be the most pressure, when they can apply the most pressure on these 4 Democrats in the Senate who are in a dicey situation, and also for those Republicans who might sometimes not want to get on board. But my point is, my gut at this point is that Kavanaugh will be confirmed. It'll be a close vote. It's not going to be overwhelming. I think it'll be a 50. I think they'll get to 50 votes. I think they could get 52, 53, maybe 54. Who knows? But not much more than that. But I think he will get confirmed. So other stuff going on. We now have Joe Biden, Joe Bite Me, who's now endorsing OcasioCortez, the Democratic socialist who's pretty much been outed in the last week. She's already lost favor within the Democratic left-wing ranks because of things we've learned in the last week. But apparently Joe Biden, a lot like the Right Reverend Clinton, they're old, they're behind the curve, they're weeks behind what's happening. And so we have Joe Biden saying he's endorsing Ocasio-Cortez. And he also said, quote, "There's Too many old white males in politics. Too many old white males in politics. It's funny he would say that after spending his entire life until he was 4 years old, 75 years old. I bet he didn't think that when he was still there, but now that he's gone, oh yeah, there's too many old white guys. When he was there, wasn't a problem. It's not just old white males. I mean, there's a lot of old white females. I mean, Pelosi, Feinstein, and you can go right down the list. There's a bunch of old white females who are just as bad as the old white males, if Joe Biden wants to look at it that way. But he's nutty, so I think his mind has left him a bit. He never was all that sharp, but I think his mind is failing at this point. And I don't look for Joe Biden to even throw his hat in the ring in 2020 to even be a candidate. I just, I don't think his mental faculties are holding up that well. And 2.5 years from now, it's only going to be worse. So anyway, we have Joe Biden again. Too many white males, old white males in politics. He's endorsing Ocasio-Cortez. Let's see. We have Tim Ryan. Now, this was a story back about 6-8 months ago. Tim Ryan is a Democrat, kind of a working class, blue collar Democrat, way to the left of us, of course, but nowhere near the crazy lunatic of the extreme left. And of course, as you remember, about 6 months ago, he tried to overthrow Nancy Pelosi. He tried to garner enough support, enough votes to vote her out and vote for new leadership in the Democratic House and in the House of Representatives, tried to oust Pelosi. And the vote was like 60. He got like 60 something votes, and Pelosi got like 120. So she still got double the amount of votes he got. But 60 votes, 60 Democrats voting to oust Pelosi 6 months ago, that number is probably quite a bit higher now. So it looks like that Tim Ryan is again making those same kind of ramblings. And Nancy Pelosi was asked about that. And she said that Tim Ryan is inconsequential. Inconsequential. He wasn't no happy to hear that, but that's what she said. Now, it appears that what she's done to try to ward off this attempted coup on her power prior to 2018 is that they were getting ready to have the votes. I guess they do that before they go on summer break, or maybe right after they come back from summer break. They were going to have the votes to vote for the new Democratic leadership. Usually it's not for new Democratic leadership. It's just a rubber stamp to continue with the existing Democratic leadership in the House. But apparently they were looking at this vote coming up to vote for the Democratic leadership in the House. And Nancy Pelosi obviously is somewhat concerned because it appears that she has now delayed the vote for the Democratic leadership till after the midterms. She's now saying sometime in November, around the middle of November, after the midterms, is when she's going to go ahead and allow that vote for not necessarily new, but the vote for Democratic leaders in the House. Yeah, I mean that's it's simple mathematics at this point. If the Democrats look bad and have a bad showing in the midterms in 2018, Pelosi will be voted out. I have no doubt. Now, she won't volunteer. She won't step down or anything like that. She will try to hold on to her power. But I believe if the Democrats have a very poor showing in November, and I believe they will, in fact, if they don't win back the House, this may happen, that Nancy Pelosi will very likely be voted out. It could be a very close vote. I mean, Ryan had 60 some odd votes. She had 120 6 months ago. So if they have a poor showing in the midterms, you add that on top of where we were 6-8 months ago from where we are now, that would be almost a year. I think that would probably sink Nancy Pelosi's ship. I think she would be done. So if the Democrats have a weak showing in the midterms, I believe Pelosi will either face a very, very difficult challenge, very close vote, and I think a better than 50-50 chance that she will be voted out of her leadership position along with Steny Hoyer. It won't just be Nancy Pelosi. The vote for the new leadership will probably, if it takes down Pelosi, it'll take down Hoyer too, and probably the number 3 and number 4 person as well. it'll be the top tier, the top 2, 3, 4 people in the House on the Democratic side will most likely be taken out if they have a poor showing in the midterms. If they have a good showing, then she'll hold on to her power. So I think that's what it comes down to. But she's now delayed the vote to after the midterms because she's feeling the heat. So that's some stuff going on there with the Dems. Now we have Kim.com coming out and saying that if you remember a while back, he was trying to work something out. He and his lawyers were willing to come here to the States. They wanted to provide all the evidence that they have that Seth Rich was the person who leaked or downloaded the stuff from the DNC. I don't know if he was going to prove that they gave it to WikiLeaks, but he was going to prove that he knew that that's where it began with Seth Rich. And of course, he was told he would have to have certain legal protections. He was never ever able to get those legal protections. But he's now saying also that he was warned not to turn over any evidence on Seth Rich to Uncle Bob the Executioner. The reason being that he was told if you turn that evidence over to Uncle Bob without getting this cleared with your lawyers and his lawyers, that what you're presenting is evidence against the opposite of what he's trying to prove, that what he will actually do is take that information that you have, Kim.com, and he will use it against you to prosecute you. That is what he was warned of, and that apparently is one of the major reasons why he hasn't, made his evidence public through some 4chan or 8chan or some other forum or what have you. So that is what we're hearing from Kim.com. He was warned not to turn over that evidence to Seth Rich unless he had gotten the okay from his attorney, which he would have to get his okay from Mueller's attorneys that they would not use that against him to prosecute him or drag him into the Mueller investigation. But that did not happen, and of course we understand why. Now, this next story is one that's got a couple different angles on it. First of all, I learned something new today that I did not know, which is that a lot of people have been saying in the last couple months that what Trump needs to do is to declassify a lot of these documents so that Rodenstein and no shit Sherlock Christopher Wray can stop blocking them from getting these documents and witnesses. So apparently, very quietly, without anybody really knowing about it or even being reported, apparently Trump did get involved. And it appears that the way he got involved was to assist Devin Nunes. Devin Nunes is wanting information on the informants, specifically Mr. Halper, Stefan Halper, specifically. But he's probably looking into Mr. Greenberg as well, and maybe Mr. Mifsud, maybe Mr. Downer. But we know specifically in this instance is dealing with the request that Nunes made to get documents about Stefan Halper. He was blocked. So apparently, a couple of weeks ago, Trump went to his DNI, Dan Coates, the Director of National Intelligence, and said, hey, I want you to produce the documents that Devin Nunes wants regarding this informant. Now, apparently, Rodenstein and no shit Sherlock Wray complained, but apparently back to Trump, but apparently he said no. The fact of the matter is, I think Nunes has a right to see this stuff. So he ordered himself. Trump ordered Coates to provide this information for Devin Nunes that he wants. So then the story picks up, because we didn't hear that part. The part we heard was the part that I'm telling you now, which is that we heard, okay, the DNI has agreed to turn over some of this information, but they're going to turn it over only to the Gang of Eight. And that was because of a letter that Democrats wrote. The Democrats would have been Pelosi, Mark Warner, and Adam Schiff, the bug-eyed fool, Mr. Schiff for brains. They apparently wrote a letter saying that giving out this information to the entire House, leadership, House committees leadership would be bad. It would give up methods and various other things. And so based on that letter, they tried to back off. And Rodenstein and Wray were using this as well to try to get Coates and Trump not to do this. In other words, to produce these documents for more than just a small handful of people. Nunes wants the whole House leadership to be able to have access to this information about the informant, Stephen Halper. So, it appears that now they have lost that battle. Pelosi, Warner, and Schiff have lost that battle. It appears that this information about Stephen Halper has already been released to Devin Nunes and the Gang of Eight. But now it appears it is going to be made available to all the committee heads in the, not every committee, but the committees that would have an interest in the House of Representatives. They're all now going to have access to this information about Stephen Halper, the informant. How much information they're going to get, I don't know. But it appears, from what we can tell now, Devin Nunes hasn't said anything. But it appears that he's reasonably pleased with what he got. He may be getting more. He may be expecting more. But it appears now that Trump did step in and he did order Coates to give up the information to Nunes that he wanted. That was a no-brainer. That was a done deal. The only fight was, would it go to just the Gang of Eight, or would it go to all the leadership of the committees that would have an interest in this? So it looks like Devin Nunes won the day, is what I'm saying. Devin Nunes now is looking at these documents that are giving him information on Stephen Halper, and we'll find out. I guess Nunes is being pretty quiet about it. I'll be watching Maria Bartiromo tomorrow morning because she usually has Nunes on, especially if he's got something new to say. Now, this may be something he can't talk about. I don't know. It'll eventually probably end up in a report, but for now, we'll just see where this all goes. But the good news is that apparently Trump did very quietly get involved a couple weeks ago and tell his the DNI Coates to produce these documents for Nunes, and then the only battle was at that point who all would get to see them. And it appears that Nunes has won the day. Very well done. I'm sure they're trying to get the information on Mr. Greenberg as well. And Greenberg for sure. As far as Downer and Mifsud, they're slightly different. They're in a different category than Halper and Greenberg. But I assume that Nunes needs to know about all of them because they were all involved in the same frame-ups. They were all involved. You know, you got to know what Mifsud was doing regarding the Papadopoulos setup, because he was the guy who apparently told Papadopoulos about Russians having dirt, which he denies. So, I mean, you have a problem here. You've got to figure out what's going on. And so you would have to have some access to Mr. Mifsud. The same is true with Mr. Greenberg. You got to find out what's going on with him. Contacts Caputo 2 times in May. He's sent over to Roger Stone. He makes this deal. He wants $2 million. Stone tells him to pound sand. You don't hear anything more from him. And then, of course, we learn many months later, almost a year later, more than a year later, about Mr. Greenberg. So I'm sure that Nunes is digging into these individuals as well. Not just Halper, although he's fairly critical, because Halper, of course, was the guy who first started reporting on Carter Page and Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn, as early as 2014, started giving information to British intelligence on Carter Page in 2015. So, yeah, he's a key player, and I'm sure Nunes is getting as much as he can on Halper and trying to figure out exactly what was going on with him. And I'm pretty sure it's a lot. He's a key component within the plan, because he is a crossover or an intermediary. He's a FBI. He's an intelligence guy, CIA, British intelligence. But then he ends up morphing into an FBI informant. So you need to find out how that happened. How did he go from being an intelligence guy, CIA, British intelligence, and all of a sudden he's an FBI informant? Someone had to put that together. So I'm sure that's what Nunes is looking at. We also are learning that Uncle Bob the Executioner, according to Conservative Treehouse, Last Refuge, they're stating that Uncle Bob the Executioner did rely on the CrowdStrike report to come to his conclusion. That's kind of strange, because CrowdStrike says that they ran Fuzzy Bear and Fancy Bear out of the DNC in the summer of 2016. Mueller's team says that they were hanging around to October. Mueller's team doesn't say anything about Fuzzy Bear and Fancy Bear. They're talking about two other groups. So there's a lot of differences. I mean, they're looking at CrowdStrike's information but coming to a different conclusion. And I don't know how that they can use CrowdStrike's findings when CrowdStrike was hired by essentially the DNC, Hillary Clinton, her law firm. I mean, it's not the FBI. How he can base an investigation on a third party that wasn't a government agency? He's saying, well, we rely on CrowdStrike. They do work for U.S. law enforcement, so we trust them. So we're all supposed to trust CrowdStrike. Yeah, that's not going to fly. And if Putin did want to engage Uncle Bob the executioner in this, he would come over and in the discovery process force Uncle Bob to prove his case. And if he was relying on CrowdStrike, I'm pretty sure that they could shoot that down. And Putin would probably request the servers of the DNC, the DCCC, and of course the computer from John Podesta. They will probably do that in the discovery process. But it's never going to happen because it's a publicity stunt. It's now being buried, vaulted up into the DOJ NSD. Nothing will ever come out of it. It was just a publicity stunt for 24, 48 hours to try to get Peter's been stroking us off the front page, I think. But it's not going to work. It was a feeble attempt, and it's will end up being a failed attempt to accomplish nothing. So now, with the last few minutes I have here, I want to talk about this dossier again because, about a year or so ago, when I first started doing these videos, I said this thing smells like a rotten Reverend Clinton. It smells like a Clinton operation. The whole thing sounds very Clinton-esque. And I think when we get to the bottom of this, we're going to find the Clintons were deeply involved in the manipulation of all these things that were going on. They were heavy players in all this. We know that it started, with the intelligence agencies and even before that. And it's again, the relationship between the Clintons, how you tie in the Clintons to the CIA, John Brennan, through the State Department or whatever. I'm not sure. We have not really been able to tie that together. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence of it, but there's no physical hard evidence of that. We don't have anyone coming out as a witness and saying, yes, I know for a fact that Rotten Reverend Clinton met with John Brennan or people in the CIA and that this was a cooperation or anything like that. So we don't have anything quite that smoking gun. But there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, and I think there could be other evidence coming forward. But, when you look at all the different paths of the dossier, you can find a Clinton connection to almost every one, if not every one of these paths. And we now have about a half a dozen different paths the dossier took to get to the FBI. And we learned about the most recent ones from Peter's been stroking us in the hearings. Because in those hearings, as Jim Jordan was going through that text where Peter's been stroking us is saying, hey, we just got this other version of the dossier, and the other two versions that we got of the dossier are identical, but this version is different. That's what he's talking about. And what's important here is that he's telling us that the FBI, Peter's been stroking us, and the FBI are really looking at three different versions of the dossier that came from three different directions. So essentially what he was saying is that we have this one that Peter's been stroking us is talking about that Jim Jordan grilled him on. And of course Ben Stroken said, yeah, well, I had 4 or 5 conversations with Orr, and we regard this as coming from Glenn Simpson. So you had, in this particular case, is what Jim Jordan is speculating, and I agree. I mean, I think this is pretty much obvious. So we have the dossier beginning here. This first path, I'm going to go through the paths for you that the dossier took. Path number 1 was going from Fusion GPS to Nellie Orr, who was working for Fusion GPS, to her husband, Bruce Orr, who then passed it off to the FBI. Fusion GPS to Nellie Orr, who was working at Fusion GPS, to her husband, Bruce Orr, who then passed it on to the FBI. That's one path that the dossier took. And if you look at where that all originated, it originated with Clinton. because Confusion GPS was the contractor hired by Mark Elias of Perkins Coie, who was representing the Rotten Reverend Clinton and the DNC. And of course we know that Hillary Clinton was the DNC at that point, because she had come in and essentially taken over. So you can clearly see that the roots of path number 1, Fusion GPS, to Nellie Orr, to Bruce Orr, to the FBI, the origins are still with the Rotten Reverend Clinton, as she was the final payee of Fusion GPS. She was the one paying Fusion GPS, doing it through a law firm, but nonetheless, her money. Then we have the other path, which was the McCain-Kramer path, where John McCain sent his right-hand man, David Kramer, over to London. He met with Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele said, as soon as I'm done with the dossier, I'll have Glenn Simpson send you a copy, and you can give it to Senator McCain, which is exactly what happened. Christopher Steele completed his last memo on the dossier. Glenn Simpson then forwarded that to David Kramer, who then gave it to McCain, and then McCain hand-walked it into James Comey. So this is path number 2, going from Confusion GPS to Kramer to McCain to Comey. And we know that if we go back to the origins of where all this began with this particular path, it too ties you back to the Rotten Reverend Clinton and the DNC, because this actually began back in late 2014 with this Alexandra Chalupa, the DNC, the Ukrainian-born DNC operative who was at the DNC as an operative, a member of the DNC. She leaves the DNC to go to Ukraine to join up with this propaganda organization. It's heavily anti-Putin, and she joins up with them. David Kramer, McCain's right-hand man, was also a part of this propaganda organization in the Ukraine. And there they stumbled on to Manafort and mostly Manafort, but quite a bit of Carter Page. Then she was going back and forth from Ukraine to the U.S., and she was filling in and having meetings with Democrats and telling them all about it. This led to them setting up a working group within the Senate, which included John McCain. And Chalupa was going back and giving all this information to the DNC, which was being run by the Rotten Reverend Clinton. Then Chalupa came back and became, again, a regular member of the DNC, and that's when Kramer and McCain went to Nova Scotia, met Mr. Wood. That led to Kramer going to England, take a look, meet Mr. Steele. Then Christopher Steele says, okay, I'll send you a copy, which he does, and that copy came from Glenn Simpson to Kramer, to McCain, to Comey. That was path number 2, and the origins of that are also with the DNC and the Rotten Reverend Clinton. Then we had path number 3, and that was from Steele directly to the FBI. From Steele directly to the FBI. And who was paying Christopher Steele? Hillary Clinton. He was working for Confusion GPS, and Confusion GPS was paying the bills from Hillary's money. It was Hillary's money paying Christopher Steele. Then we had Steele to Weiner, to Newland, to Kerry, to the FBI. Well, that's going through the State Department route. Using who? The Rotten Reverend Clinton's people that she formerly was over at the State Department. So here you have a State Department path that the dossier followed, from Steele to Jonathan Weiner to Newland to Kerry to the FBI. The next Clinton's also involved in that path. Then we have the Shearer dossier, the Cody Shearer dossier, which of course Cody Shearer, one of the Rotten Reverend Clinton's hitmen, to her closest advisor, Sidney Blumenthal. So Shearer gives his dossier to Blumenthal, who gives it to Weiner, who gives it to Steele, who gives it to the FBI. And who is ultimately behind that? Well, the two people that began with was Shearer and Blumenthal, close associates and henchmen for the Rotten Reverend Clinton. Every one of these paths that we've just went through, 6 different paths of the dossier and the Rotten Reverend Clinton, is right in the mix in every single one of them. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.